The word objection came out of Helen Caro's mouth like a gunshot. She was standing at the front of the emergency HOA meeting at Quail Crest Preserve. Her blazer buttoned so tight I thought she might crack a rib. The surveyor's tripod was blinking red right through her Aaliyah bushes. And the county clerk was handing me a stamped document with today's date fresh on the seal. I unfolded the plat map across the snack table, right on top of her famous lemon bars, and let Parcel 18B speak for itself. The room went dead silent when the clerk read the header out loud. Ground lease less Nathan Cole, Le Caro, Residence Lot 6. Helen's face went from powersuit confidence to tax audit panic in about 3 seconds. She tried to speak, but only managed to sound like a coffee maker struggling through its last brew cycle. Her lawsuit against me was still sitting on the agenda. Item number 4, something about delinquent HOA dues and my alleged disrespect for community standards. Suddenly, everyone in that room looked like they wished they had brought popcorn and maybe a folding chair with a better view. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm a software architect, the kind of guy who collects quiet Saturdays and returns your ladder in better condition than when I borrowed it. I bought my cottage in Timberbrook because I wanted to hear the creek at night and maybe never have the HOA learn my middle name or that I existed at all. What I got was Quail Crest Preserve and Helen. Caro Helen was basically a blazer with a heartbeat and a voice that sounded like someone reading a software terms and conditions agreement out loud at maximum volume. She had been HOA president for 6 years, which in neighborhood politics is basically a lifetime dictatorship. My crimes, according to her, were numerous and apparently unforgivable. I had planted a native wildflower strip along my front walk instead of the approved Kentucky bluegrass sod, which apparently offended her sense of suburban order. The wildflowers attracted bees and butterflies, which she claimed in writing were a nuisance and a liability. I built a cedar shed for my lawn equipment that she called a non-conforming hue because it was natural wood color instead of the approved slate gray or colonial beige. And according to 4 emails with way too many exclamation points and words in all capital letters, I had a terrible habit of ignoring community spirit by not waving enthusiastically enough when she drove past my house in her white Lexus. Apparently, a casual head nod wasn't sufficient. She wanted a full hand wave with visible enthusiasm, which she actually wrote in an email as a compliance expectation. Helen escalated the situation like a raccoon that had just discovered espresso and decided to make it a lifestyle. The courtesy notices turned into fines. The fines turned into threats delivered via certified mail that required my signature. The threats turned into a final demand letter stating I owed $1,420 in arrears, or she would place a lien on my property and potentially force a sale to recover the debt. She started staging what she called compliance walks every Tuesday and Thursday morning at exactly 7:30 a.m. with 2 bored loyalists trailing behind her. One of them carried a clipboard so thick it probably had its own weather system, and the other took photographs with a tablet like they were documenting a crime scene. She took photographs of my recycling bin from 6 different angles on a Wednesday morning and posted a collage on the neighborhood app with a caption that said pattern of behavior ? Along with 3 thinking face emojis. The post got 42 comments before the app moderator took it down. I caught her one afternoon standing on a stepladder, peeking over my back fence with a selfie stick extended to its full length, claiming she needed to verify my shed dimensions for compliance purposes. When I asked if she had considered just knocking on my front door, she told me that would compromise the integrity of the inspection process. She also started driving past my house multiple times per day, slowing down to stare at my property like she was conducting surveillance for a federal agency. My Ring doorbell captured her car passing by 11 times in one day, which I know because I counted. Then the lawsuit landed on my doorstep via process server, who apologized for the inconvenience. Helen versus Cole, breach of covenants, non-payment of dues, failure to maintain community standards, and my personal favorite, emotional turmoil inflicted on the board of directors by defendants' willful noncompliance. Here's what Helen didn't know, and honestly what I hadn't fully understood until my title company started digging. The creek lot behind my cottage isn't just mine in the simple way most people own property. It includes a sliver of land that the original developer carved into long-term ground leases. Back in 2001, when the neighborhood was first platted, it was a creative financing thing that helped the developer move units faster. Most of those ground leases got bought out at closing when people purchased their homes, just rolled into the mortgage and forgotten about forever. One of them didn't get bought out. One of them stayed active on the books with the county recorder. Lot 6, which happened to be Helen's lot, sat about 3 feet over the lease boundary line thanks to a charming but extremely sloppy pergola expansion project she had completed 4 years ago without proper permits or surveys. My title company flagged the entire situation when Helen's lien notice triggered an automated alert that cross-referenced my name with the property records. They sent me a letter that was professionally polite, but basically said, "Congratulations, you might own part of someone's backyard." The ground lease had serious teeth in the contract language. The kind of teeth that real estate attorneys dream about. Overdue rent triggered an automatic default. A default triggered either triple rent payments going forward or termination of the lease, which in plain English meant she could either pay up everything she owed plus penalties or move her pergola and possibly her entire house foundation if it came down to technical enforcement. The lease had been accumulating unpaid rent at $200 per year since 2001 because nobody had been paying attention to it. My attorney took one look at the documents and got this expression that lawyers get when they realize they're holding a royal flush. He filed a countersuit for breach of lease terms and a quiet title action to clarify the property boundaries. The county recorder stamped the lease assignment. To me that same morning at 9:15 a.m., I showed up to the HOA emergency meeting at 7 p.m. with the ink still drying on the official documents and a professional survey team outside marking the actual boundary line through her boxwood hedge with bright orange flags like a neon zipper through her landscaping. Helen started that emergency meeting like she was giving a TED Talk about civic responsibility and the importance of compliance. She ended it like she was in a spin class with the resistance set to maximum and someone had just told her there were 15 more minutes to go. The city's code enforcement officer, who I had invited as a courtesy to verify the survey results, confirmed on the spot that her pergola and about half of her brick patio encroached on leased ground that I now control. He said it very slowly and clearly, so everyone in the room could hear. The HOA's lawyer, a guy named Marcus, who normally handled tree disputes and mailbox placement arguments, went pale when he realized the association had been threatening a lien against the lesser of record, which was legally me, for a property that was partially sitting on my land. He actually put his head in his hands for a moment. The board's insurance representative, a woman who had been quietly eating crackers in the back row, suddenly perked up and asked out loud in front of everyone if anyone on the board had considered not poking the property law bear. She used those exact words. At the first court hearing 2 weeks later, the judge spent about 5 minutes looking at Helen's carefully organized stack of pattern of behavior photographs, which included close-ups of my recycling bin, my shed from multiple angles, and even a few shots of my mailbox that she claimed was too far forward from the approved setback line. Then he spent about 20 minutes reading the ground lease default clause and the survey report. He stayed the HOA case against me indefinitely and moved my countersuit to the active docket. My request for a temporary restraining order against further trespass and her unauthorized drone surveillance flights over my property, granted with what I can only describe as a judicial eye roll and a comment about how he wished more people would read their property documents before filing lawsuits. Discovery in the lawsuit turned up email after email where Helen had been bragging to other board members and even some neighbors that she would force compliance by whatever lever necessary, and that some people just needed to learn their place in an organized community. She had written in one email that making an example out of one non-compliant resident would send a message to everyone else. That lever snapped clean in half when my attorney printed them all out and handed them to the mediator. We got to mediation, and the menu of options was pretty simple and not particularly appealing for Helen. Option 1. She could pay for years of background rent at $200 per year, plus accumulated late fees and penalties that brought the total to around $3,800. Fund a complete boundary adjustment survey to properly document the encroachment, which would cost another $2,000. Physically remove the entire pergola structure at her own expense, and issue a formal public apology to be read at the next HOA meeting and posted in the neighborhood app. Option 2. She could roll the dice on lease termination and receive a sheriff's notice to vacate the encroachment, which could technically include part of her house foundation if the court decided to enforce the lease terms to the letter. Her own attorney, who had replaced Marcus at this point, told her, in a voice I could hear through the mediation room door, that option 1 was the only rational choice, and that option 2 was legal suicide. She picked the adult option, but she looked like she was chewing glass while signing the settlement agreement. When the excavator showed up at her house on a bright Saturday morning to dismantle the pergola, about half the neighborhood came out with lawn chairs, coffee, and, in a few cases, actual popcorn to watch the show. Helen had to stand in her driveway, arms crossed, while the crew measured everything from my survey stakes with a laser measure, and methodically dismantled what she used to call her Tuscan entertaining platform. They loaded the decorative columns and the pergola beams onto a flatbed truck, like it was an overqualified shipping pallet heading to a surplus warehouse. One neighbor, an older guy named Jim, who had been fined by Helen for parking his vintage car on the street for more than 48 hours, actually started a slow clap that caught on briefly before. People remembered this was still technically someone's property being removed. The mediator's final settlement order included my personal favorite clause. As part of the binding agreement, Helen had to resign immediately from any HOA leadership role or committee position for a period of 10 full years, and she was required to attend and complete a property law seminar being offered by the county bar. Association with the extremely specific and somewhat petty title of lines. You cannot move with a clipboard understanding boundaries and legal consequences. Helen now pays her ground rent automatically on the 1st of every month without fail. My email inbox makes a little ping sound like a tiny church bell when the payment confirmation comes through at exactly 12:01 a.m., and I have to admit, I smile a little bit every single time. The HOA cut me a check for my legal fees, which totaled just over $11,000, and sent a formal letter retracting every single citation, fine, and compliance notice they had ever issued to me going back 3 years. That letter used the word regret 4 times in 2 paragraphs, and was signed by all 5 current board members. I turned the reclaimed strip of land that had been part of the dispute into a small pocket garden with native plants, a bench made from reclaimed wood, and a discreet hand-painted sign that says, "Common Sense Reserve Public Footpath Easement." A few neighbors have told me they like to sit there in the evening. The new HOA board president is a retired teacher named Patricia who waves like a normal human being and doesn't require photographic evidence of mailbox placement. She led an effort to simplify the entire set of bylaws from 27 pages of dense legalese down to 2 pages of plain English that a normal person could actually read and understand. The very last clause added during a unanimous board vote now reads, "Before initiating legal action against any resident, the board must confirm property boundaries and verify that the association is not attempting to enforce rules on land it does not control." As for Helen's court-mandated community service obligation, she has to host a monthly question and answer educational session on the 3rd Tuesday of every month for the next 2 years, where the county title officer gives a presentation explaining boundary law, easements, surveys, and property rights in excruciating detail. Helen is required to be present for the entire 90-minute session, and her role is to stand near the refreshment table, handing out lemonade and cookies to anyone who shows up. The first session had 42 attendees. I heard she smiled through the whole thing, but that her eye twitched whenever someone asked a question about ground leases.